Storm Florence. But what we do know for certain is that we need to pay attention to this because signs are showing that it's going to get closer and closer to the United States. Right now, it's a 65-mile-per-hour storm. The pressure right now at 996 millibars. It's moving to the west at 8 miles an hour. What we want that to say is to the northwest or north-northwest. To the west is not what we want. We want it to curve to the right, which would be to the northwest. And right now, showing signs of a little bit more thunderstorm activity. We'll see what happens tomorrow morning. Oftentimes, the visible satellite's a great way to try to find the center and to assess what's going on. And by tomorrow, when the sun comes up again, this could look much different. But right now, it's in an environment, shear. We see shear in there. Think bad for hurricane development, which is good for us, right? You don't want a storm to develop. And shear tries to tear apart, like shearing a sheep, if you will. It's taking stuff off of the, it's kind of bending the storm. It's making it difficult for it to form. But we're looking at that to change, Leon. Expected to get back to hurricane. We don't know what it's going to do, but there's a few scenarios we want to look at right now.
Yeah, we have a best case scenario and a worst case. I'm going to cover the best case scenario. I'm hoping for the best, but either way, we're going to see some impacts. Take a look. This weekend, Florence right here. It's going to stay south of Bermuda as we put this in motion. Watch what it does, though, as we get into beyond this weekend and really into Tuesday. Offshore scenario. That's what we have. Florence staying out to sea, but it does get in a hug very close to the East Coast. This all comes down to this high pressure right here. If it weakens like this, that's when we get the best case scenario. But even then, we will still see some impacts, Chris.
Yeah.
I mean, the East Coast, we'll see the winds, we'll probably see a little bit of rain and some outlying thunderstorms, and also the seas will be ramping up as well.
And that's a great point. The best case scenario isn't great.
Still have some impacts.
Now, the worst case scenario could be very, very bad. And I'm not saying that to try to scare anybody, but just you're trying to, get your attention that this could potentially be a very serious situation. We don't know enough to say exactly how or what, but what we've been seeing, some of the different scenarios, is not good, frankly. So let's take a look at this. Going into this weekend, passed by Bermuda again, and in the past couple of days, look, Bermuda could get hit by this, and that doesn't seem to be the case now. Not totally out of the possibilities, but not likely anymore. More of a westerly track. I mean, there was a point where the forecast models were taking it and not even an issue right now, like we were done with this. But no, so now we're looking at it getting closer to the United States with impacts possible from Florida all the way to New England. Now, what this
That's
could end
not
up
good.
being, either a storm coming inland, like your classic landfall situation as a strong storm, or festering offshore and pushing water onshore. There's so many different possibilities right now. We can't say exactly what's going to happen. That's why this is pretty generic, right? We're looking at an area of high pressure, and this is going to be everything. What happens around the storm ultimately will determine, Liana, as we know, what's going to happen with the storm and where it's going to go.
Yeah, I mean, and we've been watching as the models have been kind of bouncing between these scenarios. One has been leaning more towards the other, others not so much. But let's go ahead and send it over to storm specialist Mark Elliott and get his perspective. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, and I want to basically pick it up where Chris left it. If there's going to be a landfall scenario where the center of our storm crosses
They're saying
over the
we
eastern
won't know
seaboard
till the
and
9th.
directly impacts somebody, how do we get to that point? What are the models saying with regards to that potential? And the bad news, which I'll throw it out there, the longer we go in time and each model run that we get, the trend is that somebody is going to have direct impacts from this storm. So first, the part we know, we've got a hurricane that's going to be going south of Bermuda within the next 5 days. One of the scenarios, which you could argue the European model picked up on early and continues to tout, is that...
Oh, come on.
I'm going to show you this and show you what the model is saying, and that forces our storm basically to stay due west, somewhere due west or somewhere just north of west, so from North Florida to, say, southern North Carolina with an impact. The other option for landfall is that you still have that high, but there's a little bit of a weakness on that western fringe, and you wind up with a turn to the north, and so that's how you get, say, the Outer Banks to New England at play.
Oh.
Where Chris left us is how you get to this storm on land.
Mark, we've been talking about the importance of this area of high pressure.
Yes.
When do you think we're going to know for certain what this high pressure is going to do? When are we going to know? What's going to be that point where we say it is or it isn't?
I think by Monday or Tuesday, we'll know.
Wow.
And we'll then know which quadrant of the East Coast is going to be at play, maybe not exactly which state.
So we'll say this state, and this state,
right,
as opposed to all these states.
The whole Megillah,
right,
as it will, is at play right now. I think by early next week, it'll be a small fraction of that. And then, by, late midweek, early week into midweek,
it'll be this city,
you'll know
this
exactly.
city, this city, this city.
Right, so that as we go in time, we're really going to fine-tune that spread.
Don't
But
worry,
right
I
now,
will definitely
we
keep
have
track of this, and I
continue
am
tell
going to
you
put
that in the next 5 days,
this
we have a major
webpage on
hurricane
there.
that's going to be somewhere off the East Coast. And that is in the forecast, right? By Wednesday morning, a 130-mile-per-hour storm is in the forecast here. So where do you go from there? The tropical models agree up to that point. Then they start to diverge. They bring the storm up to Hurricane Cat 3, major hurricane or stronger, by late Monday into Tuesday. Almost all of them are doing this. So that is pretty well in the cards at this point. Here's the latest run of the USGFS. Look what it does. It finds that weakness in the ridge. We start getting the turn north, but it's a little bit late to save us all. And it comes right on in towards the Outer Banks, then goes inland and could be a flood scenario in, say, Pennsylvania and upstate New York, curls back to sea and away.
That definitely
by the
hits
end of
Virginia
next
Beach.
weekend. This is a long ways away. We're going to be talking about Florence for a long time. That's just the operational run. You look at the spread, the ensemble spread, meaning all the different variations that are run of the GFS model, and it's a much larger area of concern, right? You can say on the extreme south side into South Carolina, on the extreme north side, missing completely just west of Bermuda. So that's kind of the uncertainty with time from the USGFS model. I want to show you what the European model is looking at. And it has a strong storm, but an even stronger ridge. So there's no way to escape to the north through Tuesday. This is the part that's pretty well known. After that point, the European model, with its very strong high, keeps our storm on that westward track. Could bring it all the way into North Florida or maybe even into the Carolinas with time into late next week. It's a little bit slower, and it's certainly further south and inland. There is a model spread because of the ensembles from that as well. This was the overnight run. We're just now getting in the today's run, this morning's run of the ensembles. And again, the trend is not really our friend. I'm going to switch this to white because these lines are yellow. The trend from this morning, which now has the beginning point right about here, the model spread looks a little bit more something like this, right? It has eliminated some of this as an escape from the latest run of the European and shifted that possibility, if not probability, of landfall even further south into, say, North Florida, but really focusing in on the Georgia coast, the South Carolina coast, and North Carolina coast. Again, it's too early to say that that model's right, but the trends are important, and the trend is further south and further west. The bottom line, Liana, is that we're going to have a major hurricane potentially in 5 days, and then someone along the East Coast is going to have either direct or indirect impacts. The waves, the rip currents look very likely, and I know you're going to talk about that more now.
Yeah, I mean, if you're planning on heading to the coast for a late summer vacation, you might think twice, or at least have a plan in action, because things will be completely different. This is next head North Carolina and the Outer Banks, and even if Florence doesn't make landfall on the East Coast, which you could still see some strong winds and dangerous rip currents come out of it, even if it just scoots barely past the coastline. Now, here's Florence right out here. You see this bright pink color? Watch what it does. This is the latest model run. These are showing the wave heights. Now, it is going to stay, a lot of the higher waves are going to stay well offshore, but as we work our way into Sunday night, even into Monday morning, we're going to watch as this spread of darker blue coloring starts to infringe towards the East Coast. These
Come on, Internet.
But the bullseye, that's 40 feet or higher waves. That's insane. That's staying offshore, but that is still something that we have to keep a close eye on, especially if we get the direct hit. Now this weekend, we're already seeing the impacts. We're seeing moderate rip current threats spreading from the Georgia coastline up towards Charleston and into the Carolinas, and even further north. We're talking about Wilmington and the Outer Banks still in the moderate rip current threat. And as we take a look at the big picture, the entire coast of the East Coast Still seeing the moderate and even low impacts through this weekend across New England. Now, if you do get stuck in a rip current, you do need to follow the rip current out. You need to make sure you swim parallel to the shore so you can catch this inbound current. If you try swimming against the rip current, Mark, I mean, that's when people get tired, and that's when problems and unfortunately deaths happen a lot. So that's something to take into consideration, but it's not the only threat because the tropics, they're firing up.
Absolutely. Those rips move faster than, say, Michael Phelps can swim, right? They are really hauling. That's why they tell you you cannot fight that back towards shore. But Liana's absolutely right. There is a lot more still to come in the tropics. I keep saying, like, you should prepare for Florence if you're somewhere along the East Coast, because the season is not done yet.
Just had another earthquake.
Worst case scenario is you beat the line.
Let's see if I can find out.
Definitely going to happen somewhere, and you're just prepared for what could still come later
What it
on.
was.
Because let's face it, that canned food isn't going bad. That's why you buy it before a hurricane. It won't
Mexico
go back without
again.
the power on, and you won't need it in the fridge. So let's start close to land. We've got 94L. This one basically flared up tonight, overnight, last night, into this morning, I should say. It's on the heels of this upper level spin, and that's helping to get the air out of the way, and that allows for rising motion, and so we wound up with a bunch of storms. Once you have a bunch of storms over warm waters, there's always a chance that you can develop tropically this time of year, so about a 20% chance of development there. Not a likelihood of development, but something we're watching. On the other hand, 92L, about 100% chance of development, as is potential Tropical Cyclone 8. At any point, we could have development out of that. Let's start with potential Tropical Cyclone 8 because there is already some warnings that have been issued. It's not that organized at the moment, but that could change at any point, right? At 100% chance of development. That's why we have these warnings that are up and why it's a potential tropical cyclone. They needed these warnings for the southern chain of the Cabo Verde Islands. And over time, this one goes west and then starts to bend north a bit after Monday, which is good news because the sooner that turn north occurs, the less the chance of a U.S. impact will be. On the other hand, we have this area, 90% chance of Invest 92L within the next 5 days becoming a depression or a storm. Where it's going is almost due west. You don't see that northerly component in the area where it might develop, and the tropical modeling keeps it west even after that 5-day time frame all the way into, say, the Caribbean islands, which means, say, Puerto Rico or even potentially U.S. interests way down the line need to be watching 92L also. So, Chris, there's a lot to follow. Florence might be the big, gorilla in the room, but 92L could be a sneaky one also.
And Mark, when we get another chance to talk coming up in a little bit, I want to ask you.
All right, guys.
What are you
I've been on for 13 minutes. I will put the link on here for you guys to go to immediately if you want to watch it. God bless. Be safe. Thank you so much for watching.
In just a little bit. And still ahead here on Weather Center Live, lightning destroys a home in